Economy is performing very well. Year to year, we see economic growth rising, and for a number of years, the average growth rate has been over 6%. And this year, we shall close June at 7%. Now, in the next financial year, we anticipate the first oil to come out. So at the onset of the oil revenues beginning to come in, we expect an acceleration in economic growth rate to now a double-digit figure of slightly above 10% in 2026-2027. So the GDP is projected to come to over $80 billion next financial year. So you can see we are on course of growing our economy tenfold by year 2040. But that does not mean that we do not have challenges. The challenge number one we have is how to translate this growth into tax revenues. We continue making efforts to widen the tax base so that we are able to raise the necessary revenues to finance our ever-growing demands. But we have had a number of challenges in this regard. We're looking at the tax-to-GDP ratio. For a number of years, it has stagnated at 13%. But now in this budget, we expect a growth on tax-to-GDP ratio of about 0.9%. So that will take us to almost 16% in 2026, 2027. But the question remains, is this what we need? No. We need much more than that. In the medium term, we are looking at 20%. And in the long term, the president has proposed that we must raise the tax-to-GDP ratio to about 25%, so that we are able to fully finance the budget and reduce the borrowing. Because what happens now, our tax-to-GDP is say 14%, and our expenditure to GDP is about 23%. So what does that mean? It means that deficit between 14 and 23 is mainly financed by borrowing. So which is a challenge, because borrowing comes at a high cost, because most of if you look at our numbers, you will realize that the concessional windows of financing have in the past years been declining, and domestic borrowing has been rising. So domestic borrowing is slightly expensive compared to external. And also the external sources where we have been getting money now are largely commercial external on commercial terms, which is also expensive. And this has resulted into the rise in interest rates and interest payments. For example, this financial year alone, we shall spend over 14 trillion in interest payments. So, which is not a good indicator. So what have we done? We are working on the new on a new domestic revenue mobilization strategy. And what is in this strategy? To strengthen mechanisms of generating this revenue internally by one, tax evasion. We have got many people who don't pay the due taxes. We must deal with them. We must deal with the corruption at the revenue authority, and also we must deal with the informality in our economy. We must make sure that most of the businesses are registered for tax purposes. We must introduce mechanisms of collecting taxes from the businesses that are not so structured. That's why you see us introducing IFRIS, so that we are able to capture even the businesses which are not well structured. We must digitalize, because if we are to make progress, we must reduce the interface, the human interface, especially in tax collection, must be minimized, so that the risk of people being compromised is reduced.